that when he was looking to be elected, he knocked on doors. I call it the Ryan Dorsey effect. Because there's something very irritating about waking up for me and my family, and we're saying, who's the white guy knocking at the door? And he just kept coming back. I'm like, we're hiding in the house, pulling down the blinds. He kept coming back until we answered the door, and he introduced himself. And I told my husband, despite how I'm feeling at this moment of somebody waking me up on a Saturday morning and they're not delivering coffee, I'm going to vote for him. Because to me, to be able to engage with your community from the ground up shows a special love for the work you do. He is a longtime resident of Baltimore City's 3rd District, a lifelong resident, in fact. He was raised in Bel Air Edison, Mayfield neighborhoods. He attended St. Francis of Assisi schools. He graduated from the Peabody Conservatory. He has a bachelor's degree in music composition. I don't know that part of Ryan, because the Ryan that I know walks into spaces filled with people in suits, and Ryan kicks the door open. He brings his own chair in the whole spirit of Shirley Chisholm, and he makes a way at the table for issues that people aren't really talking about. So join me in welcoming Councilman Dorsey to the stage.
Thank you. That was by all means the best introduction I have ever received. Thank you so much. All right, I've got 3 little note cards here. They each say a few words on them. These are some suggested talking points, because I don't really prepare statements, because I'm either okay to just shoot from the hip or read something. If I try to do anywhere in between, it gets really ugly and embarrassing. When I knocked on all those doors, I said one thing over and over and over again. And I had to be taught to say one thing over and over and over again, whatever that may be. I met a guy who had recently won office and took an hour out of his time to meet with me when I was like, I have no experience in politics or government or campaigns or any of that stuff. And he told me the one sentence that he used at every single door, and it rolled off his tongue really easily, and I thought, oh, that's what I've got to get to. And I had no idea the path to that. But what I arrived at is that we will not see better public health, better public education, or better public safety outcomes if we don't address them for what they are, symptoms of deeper problems around livability. And that is where we live, where we work, and how we get between the two. And that we have to address those challenges, the disparities that we face around housing, employment, and transportation for what they are, problems of our own making, through policy that's been allowed to be driven by racism for the city's entire history. And that we can't fix policy-based and policy-rooted problems with programmatic solutions. We must have deliberately anti-racist policy to undo the racism of the policy that exists. And that's how we begin to pave the way for a livable city in which it's reasonable to expect better public education, better public health, and better public safety outcomes. And that's what I delivered to people at their doors after just essentially deciding that I was going to run for office. I don't think that things are what they... Hi, Delegate Williams. Just saying generally, things are not what I think they ought to be, and things are not what those around me think they ought to be or could be, given better leadership. And so I decided to run for office because it seemed doable. It seemed achievable that I could actually win a seat on the city council. I didn't know what it would take, but I figured I could figure it out as I went along, and that it was a prerequisite that I just surround myself with smart, hardworking people, and they would help me figure this thing out. So, as Dr. K said, I knocked on a lot of doors, and that was it, just wanting to see better. And it happened that as I was going, okay, I got to get out there, I got to show my face, I got to start doing things, I got to show up, because I wasn't an activist. A lot of people try to say, Dorsey's just that activist in City Hall with an agenda, and that's really not me. I'm just a guy that has figured out how to get into a lane and stick with it. So I wasn't an activist. I wasn't a community association member or president or anything like that. And I already told you I didn't come from a background in politics, government, or campaigns. I was a guy with a degree in music composition, working for a family business, selling and installing home theater systems. I was hanging TVs on walls for a living, up until 2 days before taking office. And so I decided I needed to get out there and start doing things. And it turned out that there was a bridge being replaced in the district that I wanted to represent, that it was 111 years old, and it was built for a 70-year life expectancy. And we were gonna have another 1 in 100-year chance to make it a really good bridge, and the plans were not for a really good bridge. They were plans for a bridge that was gonna be really unsafe for cyclists and pedestrians. And people had been complaining about these poor designs for a while and not being heard. So I made a little bit more noise than had been made. I also showed up to a thing where folks were talking about kind of brainstorming, hacking solutions to how to better get kids to school. And these two experiences together really ingrained in me very quickly that people, no matter how they need to get from one place to the next, need to be able to get from one place to the next reliably and safely. And that if we can't get a kid, how can we expect to educate a kid that we can't even get to the building? And 40% of city school students are missing more than a month of school every year. And we attribute this most significantly to transportation challenges and to chronic illness like asthma. And this has also a direct relationship to the transportation environment that we have deliberately fabricated in Baltimore City. And so these things started to come together for me as seeming like a critical issue. And the more I looked, there had never been really somebody championing this in the city council. And I knew that I could count on, remember I talked about housing, employment, and transportation, where we live, work, and how we get between the two. I knew that there were people fighting for a $15 hour minimum wage and that I was gonna get behind that. I knew that there were people fighting for fair housing and I was gonna get behind that, but I didn't know that there was anybody fighting for what the city could do to improve transportation. That we had a lot of people for a long time pushing transportation onto the state officials, saying, hey, the buses don't run on time, blame the MTA. They're state, not city. But I started saying to folks, we own the roads that those buses run on. And there's only one place in the whole country that's increasing bus ridership, and they're doing it through one thing, changing the design of roads to prioritize buses. Not to make them equal with cars, to make them prioritize above cars, because they're a more efficient, more sustainable mode of transportation, and that's how we need to be moving people around the city. In the 1950s, Baltimore still had a great streetcar system, and it was moving 50% of the people anywhere in the city, but only making up 3 to 4% of the total traffic volume in the city. It's an incredibly efficient way of moving people around the city, but at the same time, we had a transportation director who said, it's not that I mind Baltimore's streetcars, just that they run on the streets. Because he believed that the streets, if they had not already been made so, really the way of the future was to make them for cars, not people. And if we look all around Baltimore City, we can see what that's done to neighborhoods. They've kept businesses from continuing to be able to thrive. They've kept businesses from wanting to locate in neighborhoods, and they've created gridlock through prioritizing cars. Prioritizing cars never does anything but induce demand for more cars. And so I put forth a complete streets ordinance as kind of one of my first things, like my first big bill. I put it in, and in the meantime, I also increased the fines for parking in bus stops, because we had a lower priority for finding people for parking in bus stops than we had for parking somewhere else. I think that you should pay the same price for getting in the way of somebody who's riding the bus with a wheelchair as you should for somebody parking their car in the middle of Pratt Street. I just think that these modes and these uses These needs are as important for one person as they are for the next, and so we should treat them as such. And now, along with increasing the fine for parking in bike lanes, I think that we're the first city in the country that actually has parity between these modes, cars, buses, and bikes. $250, don't park, it's expensive. So I just kind of briefly said, transportation means access to, I related it to education, right? But I think that that really holds true for everything. An opportunity that you can't get to might as well not exist, right? We see this, there are corollaries to this in the digital divide, right? We see certain communities where broadband access exists and others where broadband access doesn't exist, and we talk about the digital divide. And the same thing exists with transportation. If you don't have a way to get at the resource, then why does it matter to you if it exists or not? And so transportation is posing an extreme barrier to opportunity for people in Baltimore City, and it looks exactly like the racist history of our city. In Baltimore City, 33% of households lack access to a car. I'm really fortunate to represent this 3rd district where violent crime is extremely low, education levels are high, median income levels are high, home ownership rates are high. We have all these great statistical indicators. We're the only city council district in Baltimore without a food desert. But even that's related to transportation. We could lose every single grocery store in the 3rd district and still not develop a food desert, because too few people lack access to a car. A food desert even is not defined as whether I live close to a grocery store, but how long it takes most of the people in my community to get to a grocery store. Too few people in the district that I represent can get into their car and drive to Mount Washington or to Towson or to Parkville or wherever they might want to go for their shopping needs. We have all these great statistical indicators about my district. That's an outlier. 33% of households, and I have a very diverse district as well in terms of race. And that's unusual for Baltimore City. 33% of households lack access to a car, but in every single historically redlined black community statistical area in Baltimore, the rate of vehicle non-access is above 50%. There are no other community statistical areas in Baltimore City where the vehicle non-access rate is above 50%. Only ones that have been historically, through government policy, discriminated against, through segregation policies. Further, within every single historically redlined black community statistical area in Baltimore City, there are individual census tracts where the rate of vehicle non-access is above 70 and above 80% in some cases. And there are no other census tracts within Baltimore City that have those rates of vehicle non-access. The real question about equity comes in not just when we see that kind of disparity, but then when we look where our money goes. We still allocate money to build and maintain roads in those neighborhoods and connecting those neighborhoods to others in the city, primarily for the use of a prioritized automobile that, as I said, in some cases 80% of people do not have, instead of prioritizing the mode of transportation that exists for those 80% of people, or 70% of people, or 50% of people. And so that's really what's at the heart of the justice issue in Complete Streets, which I have been, just running full speed ahead with for the last year. There's a website, BaltimoreCompleteStreets.com, where you can read the policy paper from my office, the bill that we introduced last July, and see the coalition that we've built around that. It's not easy. It's not easy to pass legislation like this. The city just last year wrapped up a 5-year-long process of passing a new comprehensive zoning code for this city. And so this addresses the land use in the city, and Complete Streets is really about addressing the streets in the same way and in a way that is respectful of the land use that is adjacent to it. And it's a big shift for people to look at the city that has prioritized the movement of county commuters in and out of downtown as a direct result of white flight and people who historically worked in Baltimore's downtown moving out of the city, but because they continue to work in large numbers in the city, continue to be able to wield political influence over how the dollars are being spent from the tax base that remained in the city. How we get from continuing to prioritize the needs of people who don't live in Baltimore City to the detriment of the communities that exist here, to one that puts the neighborhoods in Baltimore City first through making them safe and equitable for transportation users of all modes. So that's my that's my thing. I think I hit on all of it.
Thank you so much, Councilman Dorsey. I think it's important when you start thinking about who you are that you ask other people. I went out and I asked the people about Delegate Robin Lewis. I said, can you tell me about her? I'm not intimately connected with her like I am with Councilman Dorsey, who I call if there's a gas smell. I am that nosy person who has an issue who calls all the time. But I wanted to find out about Delegate Lewis. And what I've heard about her is that she is considered and has a reputation for being tenacious and dedicated, hardworking. They told me that she never, ever gives up when it's something that she believes in. I am told that she's able to see national issues through a state and local lens. One person who's known her for quite a while laughed when he said that he sees Delegate Lewis like Sisyphus in the Greek story, where you are pushing a boulder up a hill, and despite the fact it rolls back down, you get back up the next morning and push it up the hill again. That for her, getting Baltimore City and getting Maryland to a place where it needs to be is the first and top priority. Delegate Robin Lewis is a state delegate for Maryland's 46th district. She has been in office since January 2017, serves on the House Environment and Transportation Committee. Now, during her first session, she voted for legislation to expand earned sick leave, protect the Affordable Care Act, and increase funding for public schools. What I found most interesting about her bio is she began her career, her international health career, as a Peace Corps volunteer, where she has lived all over the country: Niger, Haiti, Malawi, Thailand, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, Mongolia, South Africa, Nigeria, Zambia, and Zimbabwe, and she has ended up right here with us in Baltimore's Patterson Park neighborhood to do the hard work for our city. Please join me in welcoming State Delegate Robin Lewis.
That was incredibly kind, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Delegate Robin Lewis. Thank you for your patience. One thing, I became a state delegate by accident about a year ago. I've been a community leader, as well as a professional public health person, but a community leader in the Patterson Park neighborhood, where I applied my community organizing skills to make my neighborhood better. If you live in Baltimore, you know every neighborhood needs love. And the way we solve our problems is with love, working together with love. I saw a problem, like a dirty, trashy alley in my block, which was half vacant when I moved there. And I thought, let me get my friends together and let's just clean it up. Next thing you knew, we'd taken over the neighborhood association and started organizing to do bigger projects, bigger cleanups, recycling initiatives, energy conservation projects. We got featured in a PBS